What happens when a woman stops apologizing for her sobriety and starts calling out the systems that made her drink in the first place? Today's guest is taking on patriarchy, the wine mommy culture, and the idea that recovery has to look a certain way. Stick around because this conversation might make you rethink everything you've been told about women, alcohol, and what it really means to be free.
Welcome to the Sober Life Rocks podcast. You may have made the decision not to drink alcohol, or at the very least, not at work-related events. Whether you've never been a drinker, are in recovery, or made a health-related decision, we see you, and you are not alone. In today's world, networking, socializing, and celebrations often happen over drinks, and the struggle can be real. Through this podcast, we're changing that narrative. We're here to create a community where individuals like you, who choose not to drink or drink less, can find camaraderie, support, and practical advice.
Before we dive in, I want to take a quick moment to remind you why we do this. The sober space is full of wisdom, and right now, more people than ever are ready to turn their stories into something that moves the world forward. That's exactly what Amplify Sober Voices is about. It's happening January 15th, 2026 in Orlando, and it's a one-day thought leader conference for speakers, podcasters, coaches, influencers, creators, all who are shaping the future of alcohol-free living. And if you're listening and thinking, well, that's me, then go grab your ticket right now at amplifysobervoices.com. Trust me, you'll want to be in this room. Welcome back to the Sober Life Rocks podcast. I'm Margie Schaller, and this is where we celebrate the stories of people who are reimagining what sober living can look like, not as an ending, but as a beginning. My guest today doesn't sugarcoat a damn thing, and that's exactly why I wanted her on the show. Nancy McKay is the founder of Women Empowered Recovery, a life coach and the creator of the Brave Recovery Method. She's 16 years sober, a cancer survivor, and a truth teller who's calling out the systems that got her there and every lie we've been told about what it means to be a strong woman. Her story is raw, hilarious, and deeply empowering. And I promise this conversation is going to make you think differently about what recovery, resilience, and real freedom actually looks like. Nancy, welcome to Sober Life Rocks.
Oh, thank you so much, Margie. It's so great to be here.
I just am so excited. I've really enjoyed getting to know you over these past couple of months and the chance to dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
So one of the things I love to start with is understanding, where did alcohol show up in your family of origin? What was it like for you growing up? What was the scene as it was involved around alcohol or not?
It was very prevalent. My parents were very heavy drinkers. My father would have been termed an alcoholic. My mother drank heavily, I think, to tolerate his drinking, because I just got the feeling that she could sort of take it or leave it. It didn't feel like she was dependent on it. But my father definitely was. And his alcoholism got worse the older he got, and it escalated after my mom was diagnosed with lung cancer in her late 50s. And so that's when his drinking really started escalating. I mean, it had been significant when I was growing up, but
so how did that translate for you? Like, as a young child and then growing into your teen years, did you look at it as something that was like negative? Like, oh man, I never want to be like that? Or were you just completely rebellious and I'm going to do my own thing?
I never wanted to be like that. I didn't have that belief system, but I remember, this is really interesting. There used to be an insurance company here in Denver that had an office right alongside the highway that we would drive by every time we went to my grandparents' house. And it was for teetotalers. Remember that term?
Mm-hmm.
And I knew what that meant. I mean, I had heard that. I'd heard my parents talking about, oh, well, they're a teetotaler sort of thing. So in a derogatory way, right? And so I remember asking my mom one time as we were driving down the highway, why can't you get that insurance? Sort of thing, like you don't qualify for that insurance, right? And, so I knew that I wanted them to not drink.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I thought it was wrong. I just didn't like it when they did.
Yeah.
And
so walk me through then for yourself, like how did alcohol show up in your own life, and what did that journey look like?
so then I started drinking in high school with all my friends. And one of the reasons why was because it helped me fit in. I was pretty shy and introverted, and that helped loosen me up, and I was funnier and I felt prettier and, all the things. And, by God, it worked. And, I still wasn't the most popular girl around. I didn't date a lot in high school, and but it helped me fit in better. I still didn't fit in all the way, but it helped me fit in better. So, and then, that just escalated as time went on. Also, in my 20s, I was drinking more, and that just escalated. Each decade, my drinking got heavier until, by the time I was in my 40s, I had met my husband, and we were the fun couple. We were, we'd walk into a party, and, everybody was like, they're here, it was kind of like norm, going into the bar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We were the fun couple. And then my father ultimately died by suicide when I was 50. And that put my drinking into a whole different level, because I felt so guilty. Unjustified guilt, but I felt guilty nonetheless. And so it took me 2 years before I tried to end my life. And that's what got me sober, was I realized I couldn't drink safely anymore. And so I haven't had a drink since. That was Friday the 13th of March, 2009.
So one of the things that I read about you is that you said in your early days of sobriety that you weren't chasing better Instagram photos. You were literally trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what that looked like.
Well, I was just, being sober was my full-time job. I was, at the time, I was self-employed like I am now, but I was in a totally different business. I was a kitchen and bath designer. And it was, 2009, the wheels had come off in 2008, if you remember the economy. And so things were really slow. I had gotten a little bit of money from my father's, inheritance. And so, I was living on that essentially, and my husband, but that was my nest egg. And so recovery was my full-time job. I was doing a little bit of design work on the side, but really I was concentrating on staying sober, and I was going to meetings every day and trying to plug into that community, and doing everything I could to possibly not drink. And thank God that it was really the beginning of social media, because I wasn't, there was, fortunately, there were no drunk pictures of me out there, that I had to concern myself about. So, I wasn't trying to make it look pretty. I was just trying to survive.
I
And
can so relate to that, Nancy. I remember I was a single mom at the time. And so when I had the kids, which was most of the time, I was taking them to meetings because I couldn't not go to meetings. I was bringing them with me to the grocery store because I kind of wanted that accountability of not having the wine leap into my cart without somebody noticing. But then on weekends when I didn't have them, I would just glue myself to somebody's side, and I would just go with them on their chores and sit with them while they did their laundry, and go to the stores when they went to the stores, because I just didn't trust myself to be alone because I drank alone. And those early months were really, really hard, but it developed something in me that I didn't appreciate until later. So talk to me about the strength, that inner strength that you began to develop as those early days kind of took form.
oh gosh. Well, it took a while. And I realized, the thing that I had, this thing with the 12-step program and turning it over to God, and or to a higher power. I had a problem with that. Um I had a really bad taste in my mouth about God, because he took my mother away from me, and she was you know she was wonderful, and she really suffered with this cancer bullshit that she went through, and I was really pissed about that. So I couldn't even say the word God, let alone believe in that entity or a higher power of any kind, really. um so I called God Murphy for a long time. And then one day, when I was sitting out on the patio, having my coffee and smoking my Marlboro Lights, it was dark, and I had one of those um, God moments. I closed my eyes, and I asked God for direction, or whoever, Murphy, somebody help me stay sober today and whatever. And I felt this burning light in my eyes, and it wasn't the sun, because the sun wasn't up yet. And I'll tell you, it was really astounding. And so from then on, I I knew that there was something else. There was something out there
Mhm.
that was bigger than me, that I could ask for help.
Mm.
And that gave me strength in myself, knowing that I could ask for help and not feel weak in doing so. And I'm not sure if that makes any sense whatsoever.
It does. It does, because I mean, I was raised by a woman who was sort of at the forefront of the women's led movement. And she would tell me all the time, Like, you have to be twice the person that a man is. You have to work twice as hard. You have to dress twice as nice. You have to say twice the right things, be quiet at twice the right moments, and then come home and be twice the mother and twice the wife and all the things. And so all I knew was to put on all of this mask and
Right.
what I showed people. And when I got sober, and I too, early days, got sober through AA, and it was suggested to me that I just drop all of that and be really who I was at the moment, which was a huge mess. That was a tall order. That was a big ask.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I was in so much pain and so desperate and so afraid that I was going to drink again that I was willing to do whatever somebody told me. And so I would just go to meetings and cry. Like, that's all I had in me to do. And it really felt like I was a failure because it didn't jive with what I had been told about being a modern woman.
Yeah, and I think it's a double-edged sword. I think I think that there's, being authentic and being empowered is also knowing when to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's courageous to ask for help. I don't think it's necessarily smart and strong to think that you can do it all by yourself. I think it's smart and strong to know that you can't necessarily do it all by yourself and that you do need some help and that it takes guts to ask for it, right? I know sometimes I want to be so fucking in control. And oh no, no, I can do it on my own. Thank you very much. I'm not going to ask for help because I'm too fucking proud. And that's what it boils down to is I'm too proud.
100%. 100%. I read this beautiful poster back in the 80s, and I wish I'd bought it at the time because I misquoted all the time. But it was that same sort of sequence of, a real woman does this and does this and does this and does this. And then at the bottom, it said, actually, no. A real woman fills her teacup first and gives others from the overflow. And I just love that because I was never taught to fill my teacup.
Oh, God, no.
I was taught to give until I'm dry and then keep giving.
Right.
Which kind of brings me to this amazing LinkedIn article that you wrote called 16 Years Sober, What I've Learned About Life, Patriarchy, and Not Giving a Damn. In there, you said patriarchy loved the drunk woman. She's easier to dismiss, control, and underestimate.
Yeah.
I mean, that line stopped me cold. So when did you start seeing your drinking and then sobriety, not just as a personal one, but as, a women's issue, a feminist issue, if you will?
Well, so much of this has come to me. It didn't, this didn't occur to me when I was drinking. It occurs to me, from the rearview mirror, right? It's like, oh yeah, when we're drunk, they can really manipulate. We can be easily manipulated because even if we're not intoxicated in the moment, chances are that our self-esteem is really diminished. Because if we're drinking a lot, chances are it's because we are trying to cope with something that either has, trauma that has caused us to feel shame, or the drinking has caused us shame, but somewhere shame is a part of the equation, right? And so then that can become a tool for manipulation. And I just think that, and I'm not saying that all men are this way. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, I am married to a really, really wonderful guy who has never treated me that way. However, I've worked for a lot of men who did or would have acted that way had I given them half a chance. I've always been kind of a spitfire, and fortunately my drinking didn't get too much in the way of my career. Although, I can remember pockets of it kind of being where it could have really gone sideways if I had allowed it to.
And I think that you're bringing up a really good point about not all men are that way. I think that we have been socialized certain ways such that there's these microaggressions that people aren't even aware of.
Right.
These little side comments or these little cliches that it doesn't occur to them what that does to the recipient. We see it in, minority cultures. We see it in sexuality, select choices. And I believe that it's the same with alcohol, that, the good old boys culture, right? The mommy wine culture, you can't hang with the boys. You're just a lightweight. Like all of these things, all of these little phrases diminish without even the awareness of the person who's saying it.
Right. Well, and whenever I was called a lightweight, I made damn sure to prove them wrong.
Mm-hmm, me too. But lightweight implies so much more than alcohol. It implies that you're just not up to their standards in all the ways.
Right. But, conversely, also, when I was sober, when I got sober, a year after I got sober, I started working for this really great company back in the oil and gas industry. And I was terrified of them finding out that I was in recovery.
Right. And,
there were a lot of, remarks said, back and forth about, and they didn't know I was in recovery, but, people that were not drinking, or, there's probably a step for that, or, some offhanded remark that was derogatory to someone being in a recovery program or something like that. And it just made it even more clear that I needed to keep that a secret. And what bullshit, and that's when, that really started the smoldering embers of me raising my voice. And that, coupled with, what I felt was the stigma that, and I don't want to get into trouble here, but I don't think that traditional 12-step programs do enough to smash the stigma that still exists out there. Mm-hmm. And so
I agree.
I
still, to this day, and I'll say it out loud so that you don't have to, I still struggled with the messaging that I was a liar, cheat, and a thief, because I was none of those things.
Right. And yeah, exactly. And so, the fact that they don't want you talking about the program outside of the rooms, I think is a real disservice. And so, you know, I shout it loud and proud, you know, that I'm in recovery, and I won't shut up about that ever.
Well, so how did that happen? Like what was that moment, and how far into your sobriety were you, and what happened?
Um, you know, I don't remember exactly what the pivot was. Um, I know I was still working in my job. It was before I retired, but I think I had started training to become a life coach. So it was after I had been diagnosed with cancer. So that happened when I was 58, on my 58th birthday. And my perspective on life started to change at that point. And I think that was, you know, it wasn't just the cancer and life's too short. I think that's really what it was. And it encompassed not just the cancer diagnosis, but also my voice about all of it. And I thought, I'll be goddamned if I'm going to keep my mouth shut about any of it. And I just started talking. And I told my boss, and he was proud of me. And then one of the guys that worked with me, he said, my stepbrother is an addict, and how do I deal with him? And people started talking to me about, friends and relatives. And it was like, all right, I waited too long. I should have spoken up sooner. And, then it just, it felt natural. It felt natural. And that's when you're on the right track, is when it just starts flowing.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that so much. And it's been a consistent story that I've heard, is that we're all so afraid and we're so concerned with what people might think about us. And the reality is that person after person on this podcast has come on and said the reaction was opposite what they expected.
Right. Right.
But I want to kind of talk about something else that you share about, which is the mommy wine culture. Because I drank in isolation. I didn't want anybody to know how much I drank, but I used the same messaging, that whole, it's self-care, like I deserve, and it's how I take care of me after taking care of everybody else. So how do you see that messaging showing up in 2025 when everybody's talking about wellness? And how do we start to push back without shaming the people who are still in it?
Yeah, that's hard, I think, because again, we've got so many double-edged swords. First of all, I loved the mommy wine culture when I was drinking. I mean, I thought it was absolutely fabulous that I could go find a dish towel that said something sarcastic as hell about, when am I going to get my next drink? Right. I bought that shit up. I loved it. And now it makes me so sad and angry. And the fact that people are making so much money on people's illness, and it's like, how can we encourage people's bad behavior without I was going to say pouring it down their throat, but then there's the liquor companies that are doing that. So, it's just, I just think it's really unfortunate. Yeah. And it makes women feel, because this is how it made me feel, was it's okay, everybody's doing it. So I'm not alone in the boat. And if they say it's okay that I'm filling my water bottle up with wine or vodka, then it must be okay. And I'm not doing anything out of the ordinary. It's normalizing it, right? And so by normalizing it, it diminishes the harm that can be done or that is being done. And I think that it's just doing such a disservice to women who are at their most vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, listen, I am so encouraged by things like the Surgeon General's report that came out at the beginning of this year that talks about how it contributes to 7 different cancers. Alcohol contributes to 7 different cancers. The aura rings now that people wear, where we can track the data to show that our sleep is so disrupted when we drink. And we know that sleep is part of our restorative body's needs in order to be healthy. There are example after example now of real science really beginning to show the negative effects, how it affects our gastrointestinal system and all of these things. So and the fact that the younger generation is drinking less than any prior generation because they see this stuff. It's the habits that our generation had that are still lingering on. And so shameless plug here, like we just got done developing a 6-slide slide deck that we'll give away for free to anybody talking at any wellness conference that has some of these statistics. And all that we ask is that you just use this in your wellness talks because it's the big buzzword. Everybody's talking about it: breath work and meditation and yoga and cleansings and all of this. And then they all go to the bar afterwards and get hammered.
Exactly.
So we just think that you can't have a conversation about wellness without having a conversation about including alcohol and everything else. Right. So it's my hope that the conversation is less about shaming and more about educating.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that I find really interesting is because I want to expose audiences to that information. And I think a lot of event planners and people who are in charge of putting events, not the event planner, but the
program coordinator
putting together the event, they don't want to put a spotlight on drinking and alcohol because they enjoy drinking and alcohol.
So that's what they use for their entertainment.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they don't want to put a damper on things, right?
Yeah.
So even though they, in their heart of hearts, they know it's important information, they still don't want to shine a light on it. And I think that's unfortunate because, I was talking to somebody at an event a few weeks ago, and I said, do you know that there's a direct correlation between alcohol and breast cancer? And she said, I had no idea. And you should speak to that here. And I said, I've tried
doing it. Yeah. So I have a couple more questions for you.
Yeah.
One of them is this: like, you're known for your candor, your humor, your I don't give an F energy. But has there been a moment recently where you've caught yourself still caring too much about what people think?
Oh God, yes. Oh fuck yes.
And how do you pull yourself back from that? Because I think people who have been in recovery from anything all struggle with that.
Yeah.
With old stories.
Yeah. I have to remind myself of it a lot. And I think it's really hard, as a coach also. I think that I have to show up as my best professional self all the time,
Mm.
and that I can't um, make a mistake, which I know is absolute and utter bullshit. um, and so when I know that it's bullshit, and I actually am my authentic self. Like right now, I feel like I am being my authentic self. I am, you know, um, this is when I feel the most comfortable. And, I hope that what I'm saying resonates with your audience. And if it doesn't, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But there are times when it's like, you know, I'll post something or I'll send something out and I get, it's crickets. And it's like, oh, what am I saying wrong? Why doesn't anybody like me? Sort of thing. And it's very disheartening, and so it all comes back to, I just remember, being in the first grade and nobody picked me to be on their team, sort of thing. It's that it all goes back to I'm not good enough.
Mm.
And it takes about a split second to feel that way. And then I have to remind myself that I am good enough. And sometimes it takes me reading client testimonials or looking at the things that I've accomplished, or, asking my husband for a hug or petting the dog, something that will get me to realize that I'm good enough just the way I am, and it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. But it's hard. I mean,
it
I'm
takes
human,
big
which
effort.
I keep telling myself I'm human.
Yeah, I love that. So Nancy, you have a new book coming out?
I do. It came out in August. It's called The Brave Recovery Method. And it's just a little, it's a short little book about having belief in yourself. That's the B part. Building resilience, being authentic, living your life authentically, finding your values, all that fun stuff, finding your voice. And all of that wraps up into being empowered and really having your own back. And
So is it a book or is it a workbook or?
it's a book. There's exercises in the book, but it's just a little book that I don't have a copy. Oh yeah, here's my little author's copy. But it's
Uh-huh.
so it's not big. It's about 100 and something pages, and but it's kind of my answer to a recovery program that just is. It's meant for women. It helps. I think it would help anybody. My husband just read it and he said, this is really some good stuff in here. I think it's good for anybody.
Imagine that.
But
Is it better? Is it meant for people who are newer in recovery, or for people anywhere along the
I
spectrum?
think really anywhere along the line, somebody in it, and it's not just for alcohol. It's for anybody that's, experiencing burnout or grief or, trauma that's affected how they react to situations. Like one of my clients I'm working on, it gives you some really good breathing exercises and how to pause instead of reacting, responding, and take a
And
beat.
where can people get the book?
They can get it on Amazon.
Beautiful. And again, the name of it is
The Brave Recovery Method.
Brave Recovery Method. I love that. I love that. Well, we'll definitely put that in our show notes.
Great.
So every time I talk to somebody like Nancy, I'm reminded in how much power there is in telling the truth. Like, not the polished, Instagram ready, all the things, but the uncomfortable or the real kind of truth that forces us to look at where we've been playing small or staying silent. At 20 years sober, like, it's a reminder to me that there's no finish line here. That it's a series of choices, daily, sometimes hourly, to stay awake in your own life. So if you've been listening to this podcast, maybe take a second after it and ask yourself, where are you still hiding behind, I'm fine? Or what would it look like to step forward as the most honest version of yourself? Not just for you, but for the people watching you. And if this conversation stirred something in you and you're starting to feel that pull towards leadership or advocacy, don't ignore it. Come join us at amplifysobervoices.com on January 15th, 2026 in Orlando, because the sober movement doesn't just need more stories, it needs your story and the courage to share it. Nancy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I just adored having you here.
Thank you so much, Margie. It's been a pleasure.
And if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. It makes all the world to us to make sure that we have more people who see this and more people who could be impacted by amazing people like Nancy. Thank you.